Eastern Europe. I get a lot of questions about Eastern Europe. I get a lot of guys angrily defending Eastern Europe when I talk about how Europe is screwed and Europe is going to collapse. Matter of fact, Europe is going to collapse before the United States, and that's saying something because the United States is going to collapse pretty damn soon, historically speaking. So in this video, I will analyze what the future of Eastern Europe is. Is it a good place to live? Is it a good place to have some of your flags? Is it a bad place? Is it going to collapse? I'll cover all that right now in this video. I am Caleb Jones. This is Sovereign CEO. I help men like you develop location-independent income, move to another country, or at least set up an international backup plan, and doing all of these things for very, very little money. I will go through Eastern Europe throughout this video, and at the end of this video, I will give you some Eastern European countries that I think are the best in terms of Eastern European countries to either live in or use as flags. So, here's the deal. When I say, and I'm accurate, I'm correct, when I say Europe is collapsing and Europe will collapse in our lifetimes because the entire Western world is collapsing due to the irrationality and psychosis of the typical Western citizen and the typical Western voter, and I usually refer to the collapsing trifecta, which is the collapsing USA, cuckoo Canada, and suicidal Europe. These three regions / countries will collapse in our lifetimes. I don't know even exactly how. I have several videos on several scenarios of what will occur, but I know they will collapse in our lifetime, and I know that Europe will go first. United States will probably go second, Canada will probably go third, but that's just a guess on my part. I could be wrong on that specific order. I just know that Europe is in really, really bad shape, even worse than the United States, which is saying something. And every time I say that, not every time, but most of the times I say that, and I've been saying this for many years now on my blogs, prior to YouTube and things like that, I will get a few angry guys who say, wait a minute. Eastern Europe is going to be just fine. Nothing bad will happen to Eastern Europe because Eastern Europe is not like Western Europe, Caleb. When you say Europe is collapsing, you're talking about Scandinavia and the UK and Germany. Yeah, oh yeah, man, those places are fucked. But Eastern Europe is going to be just fine. So you could move to Eastern Europe and live there for the rest of your life. You'll never have a single problem, even when Western Europe collapses. You're overgeneralizing when you say Europe, Caleb. Eastern Europe is different. And the arguments that they make are usually, they break down to one or more of these three arguments. The first one is that, hey, Eastern Europe is going to be fine. It's Western Europe that's a problem because Eastern Europe doesn't have all the crazy immigration stuff that Western Europe has. Yes, Caleb, of course. Western Europe's screwed because they're bringing in millions upon millions upon millions of African third worlders, and they're overwhelming the welfare systems, and they're raping all the women and all that stuff. But Eastern Europe is smart, and they're not doing that, so Eastern Europe is going to be fine. The second one they say is, well, that's because the welfare state. Well, yeah, I mean, these Western European countries are collapsing themselves because these goddamn bankrupt welfare states. But Eastern Europe really doesn't have a welfare state like that, or at least most Eastern European countries. They don't really have a welfare state per se that can go bankrupt. Therefore, Eastern Europe is just fine. Nothing bad will happen because they don't do the welfare state stuff that a lot of the Western European countries do. And then the third argument, and this one is really not an argument, it's just something stupid they say that's irrelevant. Eastern Europe is awesome because the chicks are awesome. The chicks are hot. Yes, I agree. Eastern Europe is a great place to get laid, and there are very attractive women in Eastern Europe. But we're not talking about the quality of women or the quality of sex or dating in Eastern Europe. I'm only talking here about the economics of Eastern Europe, a completely separate topic. I love it when these guys, when I'm discussing the economics of Europe, they bring up chicks. Not talking about that. That's a topic for another time. Great topic, talk about that a lot. And I don't disagree with you. I'm saying it has nothing to do with this topic. Now, I'm going to cover in detail why these arguments are often fallacious and don't make any sense and are actually not relevant. Before I do that, I have to state for the record that Eastern Europe is a very large region. There is no set consensus definition on which countries apply to Eastern Europe and which don't. So you're going to get differing opinions from various guys on the internet of which specific countries are considered Eastern European and which ones aren't. There isn't a lot of consensus about this. You're talking about literally 33, 34, 32 countries. Those are a lot of countries. So it is difficult to generalize when you just say Eastern Europe. That part is true. So a little bit in this video, I'm going to go through the 5 regions of Eastern Europe, but you can break up Eastern Europe into 5 categories, and those are much more easy to generalize on because those are a little more localized. Cover that in a second. But speaking in general, here is the problem with Eastern Europe. And I've said this many times before, and I'm going to say it again. So I'm going to blow your mind about something. You ready for this? Eastern Europe is in Europe. I know I just blew your mind. I know that's crazy. Eastern Europe is part of Europe. That's why they call it Eastern Europe. They don't call Eastern Europe Eastern Asia. They don't call Eastern Europe Eastern America, right? They call it Eastern Europe because it's part of Europe. You're like, so what? I'll tell you so what. Let's use an example of a different country. Let's talk about other countries that some people defend, like certain Scandinavian countries like Norway with their sovereign wealth fund, or Switzerland, who are doing a lot of things right in Europe. Let's take Switzerland as an example. Let's say you love Switzerland. Switzerland's gonna be great. Hey, yeah, all these other European countries suck, but Switzerland's awesome. Switzerland's not gonna collapse. What happens to Switzerland if Switzerland is doing everything perfectly, but all the countries around Switzerland collapse? And if you don't like that example, use another example. Pick a country you like, or pick a hypothetical country. You have a country that is run very well and very effectively, very strong economy, doing everything right. And all the countries around that country, all of them, or just about all of them, collapse. Their economies go to shit. Does that mean good things for that country? Bad things for that country? Or does it not affect that country at all? Which one do you think? The answer is, if you have a brain, if you understand anything about macroeconomics and international trade, is that that country is in trouble. Even if that country has done everything right, when all of its trading partners, or the vast majority of its regional trading partners, go under, that country is in trouble. At a bare minimum, it's in trouble. Now, it may or may not collapse. That depends on the country. But the country is in trouble. For you to say that this country is going to be completely fine and totally unaffected when all the other countries, or the most of the other countries around that country, have very severe economic problems and economic collapses, that's just insane. You don't understand basic economics, and I suggest you do more research if you really think a country in that scenario would be just fine and the people wouldn't feel it at all. That is, in general, Eastern Europe. When, not if, when Western Europe collapses, when Germany goes under. Germany is the economic engine of Europe. I know a lot of non-German Europeans hate it when I say that, but it's true. Germany is the economic engine of Europe, at least at the moment. And unfortunately, Germany, as I've said many times, is at the tip of the spear of European collapse. It is probably the first country that will go under because the German people, at least the modern day German people, are completely suicidal. When I say suicidal Europe, the main people I have in mind when I say that are the Germans. For some reason, and there's a lot of historical and emotional reasons and psychological reasons we could get into, and you Germans know this better than I do, but for some reason, the German people want to destroy their own country and have been working very hard at that for the past 20, 25 years or so. And so when Germany collapses, when the rest of Western Europe collapses, it will actually harm Eastern Europe. Because if you examine many Eastern European countries, most Eastern European countries, their trading partners are directly either other Eastern European countries or Western Europe. In most cases, it's a mesh of those things. So when, not if, Western Europe collapses, Eastern Europe, some countries will collapse and other countries will have very serious economic problems. Many, if not most, of Eastern European nations will have serious problems with their economies. That is fact. That's how it is. Now, it is true, and I have said this before, that when these problems occur, Eastern Europeans will feel them less sharply than Western Europeans. That's true. I'll describe why in a second. Before I do that, you should do something. If you like this content helps you, you should subscribe to this channel. You should click the dumb notification bell. You should put a like on this video and leave a comment on this video. Say whatever you want, doesn't really matter. The more interactivity I get with this content, the more of this content I will provide for you for free. So, yes, it is true that when Europe collapses, many countries in Eastern Europe will not feel the pain quite as much as Western European countries. For example, if you live in the UK, if you live in London, when Europe collapses, you're going to be in big trouble. Big trouble. My God, you UK people are going to be in big trouble. I'm not even going to go into the details. You guys are going to be hurting. But if you live in Moldova, when Europe collapses, you will also be in trouble, but not nearly as bad. Why is that? Because the UK is much higher on the economic ladder than Moldova. So when you have a sudden drop, the people in the UK are really going to feel it. People in France, Spain, maybe not Spain, but France, Germany, UK, Scandinavia, they're going to be in real pain. And people in Eastern Europe will also be in pain, but not as much pain. So if your argument is, yes, okay, Eastern Europe's going to have a lot of problems when Western Europe collapses, but the pain won't be as sharp in many Eastern European countries, that is correct. That is actually accurate. And you can even take that a step further. If you have Sovereign CEO Alpha 2.0 location independent income, where you live in one of these more remote Eastern European countries and you have location independent income that is from outside of that region, then you're even better off. That's why I've talked about many times, one of my primary business goals is to have 60% of my total income from all of my companies and all of my income streams to not come from the collapsing trifecta, the United States, Canada, and Europe, including Eastern Europe. I want these three regions or countries to only account for 40% of my income. I want 60% of my income to come from outside of these regions. So when we experience the real collapse of the Western world, which we're seeing right before our very eyes, instead of being screwed like most Westerners, I will be inconvenienced, which is fine. So you could fall in that category if you're strategic about this. You live in an Eastern European country and most of your location-dependent income does not come from anywhere near Europe, you might be okay. True. Matter of fact, if you want help setting up location-independent income, your own location-independent business where you don't have to work very hard to maintain a pretty good damn income, you can join the Six-Figure Warrior Mentorship. That's where I coach with you one-on-one and in workshops over the entire year of 2022, and it's all free. The actual coaching and the workshops are free, literally free. I'm not kidding. You can hit this link, alphafocusprogram.com. Enrollment for that program is open now, but we are closing it in a few weeks. So now is the time if you have any interest. Now, that all being said about Eastern Europe, I'm going to break Eastern Europe out into 5 categories. These are 5 regions within Eastern Europe, and these regions are different from each other, and this will give you a better idea on which parts of Eastern Europe are risky and which parts of Eastern Europe are perhaps okay, though they will have problems too when Western Europe collapses. Number 1 is the Baltics. That's basically 3 countries. That's Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And these are 3 of the former Soviet countries that have actually done reasonably well. They've done reasonably well embracing capitalism and freedom to a degree. They're not perfect, but they've been reasonably okay since the fall of the USSR. That is the Baltics. Region number 2 is the Caucasus, a region I have talked about a lot and I have a lot of flags in. That is basically, again, 3 countries. They're kind of remote. I barely consider them part of Europe at all because they're so far out there. But those are Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. And Armenia and Georgia are fantastic countries. Azerbaijan is not. But Armenia and Georgia are great countries. I have flags myself in these countries on multiple different levels, and I think it's a great region. As a matter of fact, if you want more information on Armenia, I did an entire video on the 10 best things about Armenia. You can click that right up there and check that video if you want. Armenia is pretty damn awesome. It's one of my primary flags. Number 3, the third region in Eastern Europe, are the former Soviet states outside of the ones in the Baltics. So that would be countries like Belarus, Moldova, Ukraine. Some people consider Russia in that category. Those are the true, more Russian-ish countries. And those are kind of a mixed bag. You have countries that they range from okay, like Moldova, to countries that are basically oppressive, authoritarian shitholes like Belarus. There's kind of a mixed bag region. The 4th category is what is called Central Europe. And there are a lot of countries in that region, more here than I can go through, but those be countries like Austria, Poland, Hungary, and many, many, many others. These are the ones that are more closely tied to Western Europe. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of parallels between a lot of countries in Central Europe and Western Europe. The 5th and final region of Eastern Europe is what they call Southeast Europe. And those would be countries like Albania, Montenegro, Romania, Turkey, and again, a lot of countries, more than I can list. If you really want a full list of all the countries in these regions, you can just look up Eastern Europe on Wikipedia, and they actually break out all the countries in all these regions. I'm not considering to list all the countries, but those are the 5 categories of regions, sub-regions within Eastern Europe, and they are very different. And the best, or should I say least bad regions for you to use as flags, if you have any interest in doing any flags in these countries or living in any of these countries. In my strong opinion, the 2 best regions are Southeast Europe and the Caucasus. Those are the least bad regions in terms of being the most insulated from the collapse of Europe and the ones that will feel the least amount of pain when Eastern Europe goes down. The other countries, the Baltics and the former Soviet states, are going to have some problems. They're going to have some problems. Maybe they won't be as sharp in some of these countries, but frankly, the sad part is the better the countries are doing, the more pain it will be for their people. The worse off the countries are, the less pain because they're already worse off. The region of Central Europe, in my opinion, is the worst off in terms of Eastern Europe. Matter of fact, Central European countries, countries like Austria, Poland, Hungary, places like that, are almost, in some respects, de facto Western countries. Now, I know I'm overstating that. I know you say, that's not true, Caleb, what you talk about. Hungary isn't like that. I understand we could take isolated examples. But in terms of being linked at the hip with Western Europe and the future economy of Western Europe, it's the Central European countries. They're going to be hit very, very hard. I would never live in Poland. I would never live in Austria. It's too closely tied to Western Europe. In many cases, it's almost de facto Western Europe. So I wouldn't do that at all. I wouldn't even have flags these countries, frankly. I just wouldn't. Now, you are free to disagree and do whatever you want. As always, I am an individualism absolutist. Do whatever you like. I'm just giving you my analysis on which countries or which regions are going to do the worst when Western Europe collapses versus the ones that will be least bad when Western Europe collapses. Even in some of the flags that I like, some of the Eastern European countries that I like that have flags in, like Armenia and Georgia, places like that, even those countries will feel some pain. Trust me, when the Western world collapses. But I'm still doing flags there, but I'm being very strategic about it. And I don't live in these countries. I just have flags there. That's how I'm handling this. So that's it. That's the deal on Eastern Europe. So anytime you hear a guy on the internet saying, oh, Eastern Europe will be just fine, it's a little more complicated than that, and that's not accurate in most cases. So you can just show him this video. If you want more detail on how you can actually escape your Western country, your escape plan for actually getting out of the country within 72 hours, where can you be in 72 hours when the collapse occurs? You can watch this video right here. I go into detail about that. I will see you in the next video. Have fun. Bye.